All right, I think we will get started. Good morning. My name is Ian Rowe. Welcome to our session, Silence Your Phones. It's time for students to learn. I am sure that every single person in this room has a device just like this one. And I imagine, as riveting as our panel will be, you're likely to leave this on during this session. Hopefully you'll put it on silent. But the allure to check your email, text messages, news alerts will be very powerful. And so the plain truth is we are all addicted to these devices. And so we have to step back and just imagine how powerful a force this is for us as adults, often impeding our ability to control it, and this force on our children. And in many ways, the topic of today's panel is what states are doing, what we're doing as a country, to prevent whether or not we are going to pass this addiction on to our children. So I'm really excited. We have a fantastic set of panelists. Just listening to Dan Heath this morning talking about upstream, I think we have three upstream heroes who are working to try and prevent many of the issues that we see in our schools today in terms of mental health issues, behavior, academic issues that we know are being driven by cell phone use, social media devices. So we have Kim Whitman, who's the founder of the Phone-Free School movement, all the way on the end. Emily Ann Gullickson, who's the Deputy Secretary of Education for Virginia. And immediately on my right, Paul Renner, Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives. So we're going to have a great conversation about what states are doing. I joined this conversation both as a moderator and a practitioner. I run a virtues-based international baccalaureate public charter high school in the Bronx in New York, Vertex Partnership Academies. We opened in 2022. When we opened in our first year, we had a trust policy around cell phone devices. You know, we'll trust you to not use it. Not a good policy. But in 23-24, we changed it so that every morning, every student takes their cell phone, their AirPod, their smartwatch, they deposit it into a Yonder pouch. It is locked throughout the day and not reopened until the very end of the day at dismissal. It has been positively transformational for our environment. Virtually every issue that we had behaviorally, academically, many ways originated somehow on cell phones or social media. And our kids love it. They actually say we interact with each other as human beings during the school day versus using any moment that's free to access their cell phone devices. So we're going to talk today about what states are doing, why this isn't just the law of the land, and what the challenges are to implementing these kinds of policies. So with that, I want to just open for each of you, and Paul, I'll start with you. You know, what was the impetus in Florida to start going down this road? Because you've recently launched some legislation. I'll go to each of you. What was the impetus behind the cell phone free policy, and what have you been learning thus far?
Well, it's great to be with you, and obviously by your presence here, you are not addicted to cell phones because your colleagues are out in the hallway on theirs right now, so congratulations for that. I apologize for my voice. I'm not trying to do an RFK Jr. imitation, but I think maybe a union member slipped something in my coffee, but I lost my voice a couple days ago, but I've got just enough to share with you a little bit about this important issue. And for me, at least, we came in with a bold agenda. Speakers in Florida have 2 years, and so in year one, we had a bunch of stuff, much of it education-related, universal choice, some charter parity and various things like that. And I was really on the front end in hearing from people and my colleagues thinking about this issue of the digital addiction in children. In year two, we had a big bill, and number one priority was limiting the age of children in Florida to get on these addictive social media platforms. And so this was kind of the first piece in year one that made sense. And so we had this bill to do a number of things with respect to internet safety, digital safety, but also an effort to try to improve academics, improve disciplinary issues, but also really kind of a nod to incrementalism. We were beating the brains out of our teachers, our educational union with the school choice and all the other stuff. And so my thought process as the speaker was, let's put up something that's a good first step. I believe in incrementalism, as we have seen that in school choice, for example, for 25 years, just kind of building on the eligibility and increasing it. Let's see how this goes, and at least put your phones down during classroom time, okay? Because you can't retain knowledge if you're, reading somebody's Instagram post about you, and if it's a negative post, then you're thinking about that the whole time and have completely tuned out your teacher. And so we did that. I've been telling everybody that I have no regrets during my 2 years as speaker, and then I met Kim in our prep session, and now she's giving me a regret because what we should have done, and she'll talk about this certainly, is this distinction between restricting it during the actual instruction time and going bell to bell, which is you come in the morning, drop off your phone, you pick it up in the afternoon. One of the things we heard, and this particular bill did not have a lot of controversy. It passed 114 to nothing. So no controversy really. But you heard from people, from staff, but the objections were what about parents that are concerned about their child being able to reach out to them? And of course, you can tell from my gray hair that I didn't have cell phones to call my parents when I was in school, and it worked out just fine. You go to the principal's office and say I'm sick or whatever, and they take you out. So we had those kinds of objections, but wanted to at least start there, so we didn't, poke them any more than we had already done so. But that bill did a number of things. It, most importantly, just took the cell phones out, which is the magic bullet, right? And additionally, eliminated TikTok from school districts being able to use that at all because of their surveilling of our children. It encouraged internet safety, so the Board of Education has to look at these issues. If kids are going to be on the internet, what do they have access to during educational time? And then also some training about the dangers of social media in grades 6 through 12, the negative effects, mental health, sexual predators, all these other things. So the bill was kind of a comprehensive bill with one component being about cell phones. That little piece, that non-controversial piece, has shown a lot of benefits. And I know we have, I don't know if she's here or not, but we have a school board member from Orange County, which they can do. We set the floor and came in and said, no, we're going bell to bell. So good for them. And there were some reports right after they passed that of a substantial drop in disciplinary incidents because you can't bully people on your phone if you don't have your phone. And so this is a really positive thing. I'm looking forward to the data, the before and after data on academic performance, on, once we have a longer data set to look at both discipline and academic changes as a result of this action. But I will just say this, it is this whole concept, for me as a policymaker, of the digital space in our kids was not on my radar as much in year one. I can't claim that this was like a speaker priority or anything like that. It was something certainly that I was supportive of. Year two, when I read some books about how devastating it is for our kids online, how it's really stripping away their humanity for all of us, I think, that it became an issue that I will never stop fighting for, because I think we've conducted a horrible generational unregulated experiment on our children, and it is really destroying their ability to be relatable, to just do some of the basic things that will detract not only from their educational experience but from their experience as thriving human beings. And so the positive is we've done something positive to fix that. This really is, as Ian alluded to, we're moving upstream. By removing that cell phone, it means teachers don't have to stop kids that are yelling at each other for some post online or distracted, not paying attention. Please put your phone down. They don't have their phones anymore. And that's a positive in getting upstream of that problem. And so that's where we are in Florida. And I did, Kim, so there's always the chance of a special session. We have a hurricane or whatever. We'll come in a special session. Our session ended in March. We have a 60-day part-time session. And I did tell my counterpart, Kathleen Pasadena, this is a true story. actually, if we do come in, no matter what the topic is, because we can put things into the call, I've got one little thing I want to fix. Because I'd already realized before I met Kim, so it's not Kim's fault, that I had one regret, and that regret was not going bell to bell, which I think is really the gold standard and where we should move.
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So, Emily Ann, let's talk about what you have been doing in Virginia, and talk a little bit about this distinction between bell to bell versus just restricting in classroom time, and also talk about, are there any differences in terms of elementary versus middle versus high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Virginia, Governor Youngkin launched an executive order in July. All of the data coming in and research, statistics, you all know them, right? Spikes in depression, spikes in suicide, not just attempts, spikes in anxiety. And so we operated off of constitutional authority, and the Code of Virginia has a section where the state superintendent, in collaboration with the state health commissioner, can act with urgency when there is a chronic condition affecting our K-12 public school students. And so we launched forth on a cell phone-free education in the Commonwealth, and that includes cell phones, smartphones, and personal electronic communication devices. And we really took an approach, I'll cover a little bit now, but elaborate more later, on listening and engaging in the community. We knew that a large part of this was a misnomer in regards to what the data was saying. And so we took this as an opportunity with the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, the Secretary of Education's office, and their agency heads to really go on a campaign to educate parents. How do we raise awareness about what the data is telling us, what the impacts are of social media and cell phone use on our youth? Parents were surprised, for example, that students are using 5 hours or more a day on social media platforms, and that was alarming, because obviously that's not just happening at school or just happening at home. And so we launched into a large series of listening sessions to get feedback on what ultimately became introduced guidance. And really what we heard over and over again was, please go with bell to bell. We had some early adopters. We have school divisions, not districts, in Virginia. Same thing, just no taxing authority. And so our school divisions, we had a few forward-thinking ones, but they really came down to individual classroom or school site enforcement. It varied drastically, and so we were hearing feedback from principals and superintendents. And there also was great feedback from the governor's inaugural Youth Student Advisory Board, and they told the Board of Education quite bluntly, yes, these policies are all in place. If you asked any principal or superintendent, they would say we have a cell phone and technology policy, but enforcement was all over the place. We also had feedback from constituents well before these listening sessions, from coaches, from pastors, from faith community members, from youth mentors who were saying we're seeing this dramatic shift mentally, physically with our youth. And also academics. So Virginia had our fourth graders had the greatest learning loss in the country on the nation's report card. And so it sort of was this catalyst that we have to act swiftly, we have to act now. And so ultimately, I'll cover more about the listening sessions because it was really instrumental, and I strongly encourage you all to take that approach in your community. But we ultimately heard loud and clear, bell to bell. And so what that means, different from instructional time, is from arrival at school in some cases, but the policy outlines from the first instructional bell to the time of the dismissal bell, there's no cell phone use. Now that is universal from elementary, middle, and high school, but we definitely did hear loud and clear age appropriateness matters. And so elementary is most strict. We restrict your use before and after school as well. If it is necessary, if your parent feels like it is necessary for you to have it at school, it has to be stored away all day, but you can't use it before and after school. And then we got very clear on communication protocols, school-based emergencies, family-based emergencies, and then family emergencies. How do we make sure that those protocols are really clear? Because that was where parents had the most fear around elementary kids, was that there was just bad communication between schools and parents. And so how am I going to let my child know that pickup has changed if they can't access their phone? And so we got really clear that communication. Middle schools has a little bit more autonomy. It's left to the local community to make that decision as to their policies and protocols for before and after school, but still no cell phones.
Still bell to bell.
Still bell to bell. And then high school, instructional time, hallways, lunches, the first bell of the day, last bell for dismissal, but they can use their phones before and after school on campus. So middle school, we gave a little bit of fluidity because some of our models are like 7-8, some are 5-8, and so we wanted to give that local control and autonomy to the communities. It's my clip note.
Got it. Okay. No, that's great. And now, Kim, you've launched the cell phone free movement nationally, and I know you're a big proponent of bell-to-bell type policies. First of all, what you're coming from this as a parent. What were you seeing, just in terms of your peers, the impact, and what led you to launch this movement? And I'm curious your thoughts on, should there be restrictions not only on kids but also adults in school?
Thank you, Ian. First, I want to applaud both my co-panelists. Florida clearly led the way with the first state law on phones in schools, and Virginia's executive order is very comprehensive. They have a lot of guidance to go along with it that I highly recommend. Communication was central to their purpose. How many of you were at Johan Hari's presentation yesterday? Most of you. He talked about moms who got lead out of petrol. And that's what we're doing. Phone Free Schools movement was created by 3 moms. We have 8 children between us. And I'm in Kansas, the other 2 are in Pennsylvania, and in our school districts, we were seeing all the negative impacts of phones on our students. And our administrators weren't willing to listen and to be courageous and bold and do anything about it. And we saw the harms that were happening. I've talked to teacher after teacher who is just begging for administrative support. They need this. They need their administrator to back them up, right? They have so much on their plate. So we founded the Phone Free Schools movement out of a need that we saw for our children, that we wanted all children to experience a phone-free school day where they can be free of the harms of ubiquitous access to phones and social media, right? So that was our intent in creating the movement. We found that a lot of administrators didn't know how to do it. So our goal was to create free resources for states and administrators on how to implement a bell-to-bell policy. As Emily clearly explained, bell-to-bell, no phones during the whole school day. We take it a step further, and we require a storage tool, whether that be a Yonder pouch or a locked phone locker. I toured a school in D.C. All they use is a pencil pouch, a zippered pencil pouch. You put the phone in there, you put it in the basket when you walk in the door, and at the end of the day, those baskets get delivered to the last teacher, last hour, and they get handed out at the last bell. So half measures really don't work. They're a baby step, but what we really need is a best practice gold standard definition of bell-to-bell with a storage tool. As far as you asked about peers, we saw a lot of parents that read The Anxious Generation. How many of you saw John Haidt last year and have read The Anxious Generation, right? It's really about having an informed research-informed decision, making a research-informed decision. So you see polls where most parents want their kids to have phones or want 24/7 access to their phones, to their children, and those aren't research-based, right? That's just an opinion, not an informed opinion. So educating is so important. So there is that small minority of people that want that access, but that's truly not what's best. That's not what the research shows. So the communication and the sessions, community sessions that Virginia did is key in informing all the stakeholders of the research and what's happening in our schools and why phone-free schools is the best practice.
Yep. And I'll put to all three of you, what do you think about this idea of restricting phone use during the day by adults?
What do you mean?
So are teachers, are there any restrictions? Like everything that we've talked about thus far, bell to bell, kids are storing their devices. And by the way, I think it's really important. Emily Ann said it's cell phones, smartphones, all personal communication devices. That's also important. So it's not just about cell phones. But all these restrictions are on students. Do any of you have a position on what the expectation should be of teachers, faculty, school leadership during the school day as it relates to their cell phone usage?
Yeah.
I will jump in because you did ask me that and I forgot to answer. I apologize. But we see teachers as a model, right? So if students have their phones away, then teachers shouldn't be on their phones. So we act as a model, just like in homes, right? If parents are on their phones all the time, then likely kids are as well. So we need to model that.
And any provisions in your...
Yeah, we have a school leader toolkit. So if you want to see all the resources we have, the Department of Education in Virginia has a cell phone-free resource hub. And so linked in there is a school leader toolkit. And we address protocols for teachers, adults, coaches, that you're a role model, and what that looks like. The other caveat, though, is it's important and was part of our messaging. This is personal electronic communication devices, because we also, the governor has made it very clear we are still very pro-technology, right? And so he also had an AI executive order that launched a few months prior in January. We just overhauled our computer science standards to make sure that our kids are globally competitive with data science, cybersecurity, AI components. And so we're still favorable of school-issued technology in a purposeful learning environment, but we're trying to get rid of those personal device uses so that students are more free to learn and have that more vibrant learning environment.
Got it. Paul, any provisions about faculty use?
No, not with respect to faculty, but I agree with Kim. I think, the teachers, texting away or on Instagram during instruction time, that's a problem. So maybe that's the right place to land for the adults is at least as a best practice, if not statutory, is to say don't use your phone while the kids' eyeballs are on you.
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring.
I think so too. I think it's a great idea.
I will add, since you brought up Instagram, we also recommend social media free schools, right? The schools shouldn't be communicating, the teachers shouldn't be communicating with students via social media, because that just takes them down the rabbit hole. And then you have kids like mine whose parent doesn't allow them to have social media, right? I have a 15 and a 17-year-old. They're not allowed social media. And so that creates equity issues, right? So we need to be mindful of how we're communicating with students as well.
Yeah. Speaking of social media, last year there were 30 state attorney generals that filed a lawsuit against Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, alleging that Meta violated federal child privacy protections by knowingly making their social media services more addictive and lying about the effects of their services on children's mental health. Meta moved to try and get the case dismissed just a few weeks ago. A judge said, no, this is going to go forward. How do you think this legal effort might accelerate efforts around cell phone-free environments?
I'm not sure about the cell. I think there's a basis, time, matter, place, to say no cell phones during instructional time or even bell to bell. I don't think the courts would go that far. They have been pretty absolutist, and as a lawyer, they've been pretty absolutist on First Amendment issues. I think in general that's a good thing, but you've given me a chance to be on maybe a 1-minute soapbox. So I will tell you, if you asked me a year ago, what do you think about kids on social media? I'd say, they're probably on too much, but what's the big deal? But maybe the most important thing we did in this last session, maybe the most important thing I did in my 9.5 years in the legislature before I termed out last week, is the addiction is the business model. understand, and this is grabbing and addicting the youngest kids for lifetime customers. And I laugh because they sued us as well separately, and separate from that suit, in the bill that was our HB1 in year 2. My number one priority, which is get kids off from 16 and under. We compromised with some parental consent in 14 and 15, but we don't let kids drive cars, get married, use cigarettes or alcohol, etc. They are absolutely addicting our kids. And so I think if we want to go upstream from cell phones in schools, we need as people that care about education to care about this issue outside the schoolhouse. Because for the same reasons I mentioned before, if a kid's being bullied, if a kid is suicidal, we have 30% of high school girls contemplated killing themselves in the last year. That is a huge, huge problem. 57% persistent loneliness and hopelessness. 41% in the last month described their mental health as poor. I mean, this is an epidemic that is destroying our youth. And so you can't just get cell phones out of the schoolhouse. I believe you have to say at a certain age, before your brain can detect that I'm being addicted and this is harming me. And most adults can say, I'm drinking too much bourbon, or I'm smoking too much cigarettes, and kind of push away. Kids can't realize that until the frog that's in the boiling water is dead. And so if we want to get upstream, we need to really address this issue, which is a tougher issue because it is a First Amendment issue. Now we're saying, can you use a cell phone and social media when you're home? But that's the most dangerous time, when the doors are locked, parents are asleep, and some sexual predator that's a 50-year-old man is pretending to be, through technology, a 15-year-old girl. And there's a story, if I can get like 30 seconds more, in Duval County, a police officer does these crimes against children, who is a bald 50-year-old guy, and that's why I use the example, who goes on technology and looks like a 15-year-old girl, shoots a text message out, or through the social media platform, that is, and gets a response from a real 15-year-old girl in 30 seconds, and off you go. This is a huge problem. It's the most dangerous place for your kids to be right now. And so we can't fix education and all the distractions and the suicide and the mental health issues and the sexual trafficking and all these things that are happening unless we build off of the schoolhouse and go upstream of that to just get them off until they're 16 at least. I'd go to 18, but I think it needs to be something that's nationwide.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned cigarettes. And these lawsuits against Meta, is there anything to be learned actually from the fight against tobacco in schools? I mean, in New York State, there used to be smoking rooms in high school, right? I mean, imagine that. And we ultimately came to our senses and said, maybe that's not such a good idea. Is there any parallel we can learn from how tobacco, and there was usage of the courts like now?
You didn't know you were team yet, but we did a video. I'm happy to upload it and put it out on your site for the summit if that's possible. But we did a clip from the 70s where senators were asking cigarette executives, is nicotine addictive? And every one of them said, no, sir, nicotine is not addictive. And they just went down the line and juxtaposed with Mark Zuckerberg saying that my platform is not addictive. Yep. And so it is the exact same thing, Ian. It's the exact same thing. They are profiting off of addiction, and it's a very hard thing to get off of. And we know that 3 hours or more, I think you're twice as likely to suffer depression. These kids are on for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And so it is the exact same thing. Yep. And we're going to learn too late for many kids and step back from it. But I think this is an issue that is really emergent, and we really have to all be on board to get it fixed.
And can I add, there's also a lawsuit with over 200 school districts suing social media for the harms that students are having on school premises, and it's depleting school districts' resources, right? Counselors, SRO officers, teachers, administrators, their time, right? So there's more than just attorney generals. There's also school districts. So the more litigation that is occurring, I think the sooner we will get there. There's also the Kids Online Safety Act that we're advocating to get passed in Congress, right? We have little time left, so call your congressman and ask them to pass the Kids Online Safety Act, which will give provisions to protect children from the harms of social media.
Yep. So I was on the school board in my own hometown, and we were debating, whether or not to ban cell phones, and I thought this would be obvious. It wasn't. There was huge pushback from parents who did want immediate access to their kids. What about a school shooting? Especially at the high school level. No. We need to have our kids. We can't insulate them. Yeah. And so we did not end up with a policy that was a bell-to-bell. So how do you when folks come to you and say, I need immediate access to our kids, look at the school shootings, what's the right response? How do we get what seems to be a very compelling case to ban cell phones and all the other devices to address what are legitimate concerns?
Well, I'll start. So in our executive order, we stipulated that we had to do a lot of stakeholder engagement. So we had 21 different stakeholder sessions in less than 2 months out in the field with various constituencies, had over 1,100 attendees and over 6,000 public comments. And a large part of that was educating on a lot of what you just heard about social media addiction, about the human trafficking element, about the use rates and the impact on our youth. And then we really went into the actual policies and guidance development. And one of the biggest areas of concerns was around students with health needs and sort of the sophistication of apps these days, say for like glucose monitoring. And so we put into our ultimate final guidance addressing IEPs, 504 plans, English learner unique individualized plans, as well as individualized health plans to make sure that where accommodations were linked to that use, again, on a personal device where that was like absolutely necessary, then the local community could work at that school site for that individual student's accommodations. So that was a big area that we heard both before our guidance was drafted and then once our draft guidance launched in August before we finalized the guidance in September. The second major one was around school safety. And obviously, the horrific school shooting in Georgia happened within days of our draft guidance being introduced. And so there was a big flood on the back half of public comments about what happens if this is my student. And so in our draft guidance and our final guidance, there is a much more enhanced section on school-based emergencies, in particular, more of these extreme cases. And, Virginia's really led the way for a long time on monitoring of students when they appear in crisis and really making sure that every single school every year updates a crisis plan, models on how to communicate with families. But we also heard from the field, we don't feel like we know what those protocols are, that this would actually work. Schools were giving responses like, we'll update parents every 2 or 3 hours. Well, in a severe situation, that's not fast enough. And so the governor really has leaned into that, and we are starting a task force just around emergency communication of how do we elevate best practices of law enforcement and school divisions, having a much more united front for those more sensitive situations. And that's been really important. But there is also a group of parents that just want to be able to communicate with their kids. I was joking with the panelists beforehand, I'm the millennial kid that was texting in the classroom in 7th grade with my cool slider phone. And then I was the middle school teacher confiscating the phones because I knew it. And they'd always be like, Miss G, how did you know we were texting? And you're like, well, because I was you. And so it's alarming to feel like you can't have that instant communication. But again, we've really been grounding Virginians in the data. And this is a health crisis for our youth and our next generation of leaders. And when we're able to really have those conversations and facts, that's been a game changer. And then the last thing I wanted to flag is we did this really exciting fireside chat with Jonathan Haidt and the First Lady, Suzanne Youngkin, and it was broadcast out to all of the schools across the Commonwealth, who then, after the fireside chat, many had led book clubs with the book, but we gave them discussion toolkits and were able to facilitate conversations in their local community with parents, PTAs, other communities around what does that look like for us? How do we grapple with this really alarming data set? is this affecting my child, and what do we want that for our school? And that was a huge shift. So that was in early September before our final guidance was issued. Right now, we have 115 of our 131 school divisions have adopted their bell-to-bell policy or further, and many of our private schools have led the way on this for the last few years as well. And so we've got 16 to go by January 1st.
Wow.
But we really took that approach of what is the minimum expectation. And again, the vast majority of Virginians were very favorable to this. We were blessed. The Washington Post did a poll right before our final guidance went out, unbeknownst to us, and it was 86% of Virginians were supportive of restricting cell phone use, not just during instructional time, but also hallways and lunchtime.
That is fantastic. I mean, on this point about school shootings, and these are horrific events, but in every conversation I've ever had with a law enforcement professional on this, they say the very last thing they want
Correct.
is for 300 kids in a building to have a phone where they're texting or pinging or they're getting alerts or parents are trying to call, because it could actually exacerbate
Correct.
the situation. So should we be getting law enforcement more engaged to be vocal on these issues, to say, no, to preserve your safety, we don't think, especially in these most terrible situations, we don't want phones?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you could miscommunicate and say run out into the hallway, and that's where the shooter is. It's an absolutely great point. Mm-hmm. And I would just say this is an area where we as humans have a self-perception problem. We see plane crashes, and we say, oh my God, plane crashes. That's horrible, and it is horrible, but it's very, very rare. It's the safest way to travel. People die on the interstate every single day. Yeah. And so what I would say back to parents is the chance, do school shootings happen? Yes, and it's tragic. It's very, very unlikely that it will ever happen to your kid. It's just a reality, but it's certain that kids are taking their lives because of social media use. Mm-hmm. That's a certainty. It's happening every single day. Mm-hmm. So that's my response back, and I think that's the cross current. What I'll say, going back to my soapbox on the social media bill, is the strongest area, because we had the same thing from parents saying, oh, what about if my kid can't call me? The strongest area of support, we did a little polling, the strongest area of support for our social media bill was from parents. Mm-hmm. And the reaction was, thanks for not making me the bad guy. Mm-hmm. So your kid's not, why are you making me the Amish kid, Dad? And just saying, look, it's the law. You can't get on until you're 16. I'm sorry. So there really is a lot of parents are waking up. I talked to so many parents who said, I just didn't know. My son's never been the same. These are sad stories. And so I think there's really a groundswell of parental support that this is so bad that my kid not having a phone at some moment that probably is never going to happen is a cost that is far outweighed by the benefits of this policy.
And law enforcement at the table is essential. They were critical in informing our guidance. They were critical on the emergency communications. Our Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security is a joint named partner with our Secretary of Ed for this emergency communications task force. We are rolling up our sleeves on things like MOUs between school divisions and law enforcement. Do we need to tighten up elements of those MOUs on communication? Who is the lead? How do we better streamline this? And they've been critical partners, so we're very grateful.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt describes this as a collective action problem. You can't solve this on your own. So, Kim, to the point that Paul just made, parents were like, thank you for not making me the bad guy. Thank you for making it so that the school made me do it. How much of that should also play in our overall strategy?
Well, I think that goes to the next level as well, that states need to act, because principals and superintendents don't want to be the bad guys. They're fearful of parents and students' reactions, even though it's very clear that phone-free schools is what's best for child development. So states really need to act on this. And I read a poll the other day that I think it said 45% of parents contact their students during the school day for mental health concerns. 45%. Mm-hmm. Child psychiatrists say that's the last thing children need is their parents contacting them during the school day. That brings up your anxiety, right? And not only are they checking for parent messages, then it opens the door to all the other messages. And parents might think they want 24/7 access, but they don't realize that the harms that come with that convenience. I like to say that society needs to stop prioritizing convenience over the the developmental needs of children, right? We need to put children first, not I'm at the store, do you want hamburgers or pizza for dinner, right? We need to think about what's best for children.
Yeah. So it seems that even though there's been lots of pushback, there's now enough examples of schools who have actually implemented these policies. Are we at a point where we can start highlighting, like, aren't our best proponents of this schools, because that's certainly what happened in our school. I mean, our students say, I didn't even know how much time I was spending on these devices or how much it was impeding our ability to speak. Is there enough of a critical mass now that we can start highlighting these to make the case for the rest of the population that isn't yet on board?
Most definitely. And I think you'll see that when one district goes phone free, it ripples, right? Then all the districts around them. And I think there's over 2,000 schools in the U.S. that use Yonder. And that's just one storage solution, right? So there are lots of examples. Richardson Independent School District in Texas is a great one. They love to share their story. They have so many anecdotes to share, like kids are checking books out of the library more, and 4 times as many books out of the library, right? Teachers are 3 weeks ahead on lesson plans. Lunchrooms are loud and vibrant, which is how we want them to be. We want kids engaged. After-school activities have record numbers of attendance because kids are connecting during the day. And that's why those in-between times, the passing periods of lunch, are critical to be phone-free as well, so kids can engage with one another so that they're prepared when they graduate. We hear from business folks that kids don't have customer service skills, right? They can't look customers in the eye, and they're addicted to their phones. Well, we need to look at the flip side and not have businesses bosses contacting students during the school day to change their shift, right? That's one of the pushbacks we hear, is that kids have jobs after school. They need to coordinate what's happening with their boss. Well, you know what? Let's protect the school day so when those kids get out of school, they have those customer service skills, all those soft skills that they're missing now.
Yeah. So, Kim, you just raised a really good point. And Paul and Emily, I'm curious. I mean, it is true. I mean, kids just want to connect, right? There's a human desire during the day. What should schools or states be doing to encourage empowering alternatives so that there isn't like this need to go to a device? Like, we started to have chess. We started putting games in our lunch period so that there'd be other ways where you didn't have to have a mediated device, but you could have gaming or some other kinds of interactions.
Well, I think you answered your question. And look, obviously, if you're spending 8 hours a day on social media or devices and then that stops, it means you're spending those 8 hours somewhere else. And if it's playing chess or, we had this time where I guess where schools are nationwide on physical education, but getting out and skinning your knee and running around and getting exercise. But just the interaction itself means that you're a functioning human being. You deal with people's moods. You deal with all these different things. It makes you, and I can't remember what Jonathan Haidt would say what that term is, but that kind of playground resilience activity gets substituted in for something that is fake connectedness. Social media has the addiction of friendships and relationships that are totally fake. And so having that shut off to get real relationships, which are hard, and you're lucky to have a few good ones. Most teens, if you look at these surveys, have no close friends. Mm-hmm. How do you go through life with no close friends? And so this will then organically happen. So we talked a lot about the immediate costs that are avoided, but not the benefits. And I think that's a great idea. And the more things schools can do to tee up for them and suggest things that we did as kids growing up, that and you said something about they didn't know or they didn't realize.
Yeah, they didn't realize how much time they had been spending or how much stress they had thinking that, oh no, what if someone posted about me? And so their entire thing, even in a instructional time, they were still waiting at the moment class ended. They wanted to go to the device to see what was posted about.
But that statement to me is a statement of addiction. It's like they're living in the matrix, somehow, and they can't get out. And then now it's been shut off from me. I'm in recovery. I'm out of my withdrawals, and I realize, oh my God, there's a real world around here and real people. This is a really, really important issue, and I think suggesting the positives is really a good way. If you're getting withdrawals from drugs or something else that's addictive, giving something positive to spin your life that doesn't focus you back on what got you there is really, really important. And I think that's an important thing we mentioned.
So we're going to go to questions, but Emily, Kim, anything, this idea of empowering alternatives that should be happening during the school day?
I just wanted to point out another term that Jonathan Haidt uses, which is experience blockers. Phones are experience blockers. And so if we want our kids to have the experiences we had as kids, Emily Ann is younger than me, but when I had as a kid, there were no phones, right? And we had so much interaction and play, which is needed.
Yeah, I guess the other part I will say, in addition to being able to prioritize other alternative experiences for youth, is just the ripple effect of other policies. So we're already hearing the impacts towards teacher retention. We've been driving at redesigning, especially middle school and high school learning models, but also more personalized and competency-based learning structures at elementary school, and diminishing behavior issues, increasing student engagement and attentiveness. Curiosity is having a ripple effect as we're exploring high school pathways, thinking differently about course structures and where and when and how kids are learning. And so for me, it's more than just, we're so grateful for our After School Alliance and other partners that are building out new engagement opportunities for our youth, but it's also, what does that school day look like? And so we're also trying to shift how learning is captured to make sure that it's really meaningful and that we can tap into that new unleashed creativity, communication, collaboration in the typical school day.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, these policies don't exist just in a vacuum, right? Yep. All right, let's go to questions. Miles Mendoza.
Okay. First, it's you guys hear me? Great panel. I think not only is it well curated, but I find myself so much more engaged because I feel shamed if I look at my own phone.
Exactly.
So, totally engaged. Great topic and great presentation. From a personal experience, so we managed my kids' cell phones, and locked them up, restricted it. But then the school issued device actually for us became a problem in that we couldn't manage it. Homework was done on it. And they would do things like have a giant Google Doc that would be like the equivalent of a text message. Mm-hmm. Addiction is a very, very powerful thing, and so kids will find a way. So I'm just curious, when it comes to school-issued devices, A, what are the problems? B, what are the workarounds? And then C, is there technology or companies, are there now more concerted efforts to try to create scaled solutions?
Well, I'll jump in first. Our Board of Education has led on, they have an internet safety model policy, but they really expanded it into screen time and devices, including their school-issued technology features. And they just introduced that also for our earliest learners in our preschools and kinder settings, because so many folks go towards screens. So that's one step of how can you build that into policies that school divisions have and finally address screen time. We also called out in our school leader toolkit and guidance on our site around thinking more thoughtfully about where and how because out of ease, right, everyone's gone to portals and apps and things, but including athletic coaches are all pinging students into an app about the latest update on a practice. And so we've really challenged them in their local community to be pulling together extracurricular coaches, guides, and to also be at the table around this doesn't work if we have bell to bell and we're really making progress for these 7 hours of the day. And the second they're unleashed with the dismissal bell, everything is pinging and dinging well into the night. But that's also where our Commonwealth conversations we've been having and educating on this data, we've also challenged parent responsibility, but also coach, faith partners, and others at the table of it has to be a community solution because it cannot just fall on teachers and it cannot just fall on parents. And so how are we talking about what tools are being used? Are they necessary? Because we've made that shift of out of ease and efficiency, but again, is that what's best for kids? And so we're at least having those conversations and recommending solutions and sharing model protocols and policies that school divisions have adopted to try to limit some of that use.
Yeah, and I'm assuming for all school-issued devices, there are constraints on what applications can be downloaded and all that, right?
Yes.
And there are kids who can get around all those constraints, right? I think you hit the nail on the head for a topic for next year, right?
I would say one quick thing, because we have a lot of people for questions, is, if you've watched The Social Dilemma, I think it was in there, but somewhere I've read, is the people that are the masterminds of tech do not let their kids, they go to technology-free schools. And so I know it's hard, but I'll just throw that out there.
Absolutely.
Hey, I'm Kevin Adams, Escambia County, Florida, school board member. Speaker Renner, I support everything you're doing on the cell phones. And we have seen just how bad it is with the fights and different things going on with these cell phones. I'll actually, in class, text, hey, we're going to get this person out in the hallway. So there's a lot of bad going, and it's just not social media, it's any media. Mm-hmm. These kids are getting inappropriate content from everywhere they turn, whether it's music, books, or whatever. Yeah. But we have teachers doing one thing, not all of them, just a few, but they're using social media to set up a Facebook page where the parents can communicate through them that way. I've been kind of undecided, so it's not with the students, but they'll post pictures. This is what we're doing in class today, and then the parent can message back and forth with the teacher if they need to. So I didn't know the panel's opinion on that one.
I will say that we're adults and we can probably handle social media, but a lot still can't, and we still want to model. But it is a different level to communicate with parents versus students.
Yeah, and I'd say there's something different about a teacher communicating assignments or progress of the overall class. Hopefully that doesn't devolve into all the things. But once it gets to kids, it's a whole other deal.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for what you all do for our children. I was a teacher for 30 years before becoming a state legislator 23 months ago, and this has been a priority of mine. I was that bad guy 10 years ago who started collecting cell phones in my classroom and just saw a world of difference in my students. Tried to get many of my colleagues to do it, but they and my administrators had all kinds of excuses about why they didn't want to do it, despite that we all know it's the best things for kids. My question is kind of taking it a step further. I had a student who came to me right before I left the classroom and became a state rep who said, Mr. Brennan, my entire life is online because from the time my mom conceived me to now, every step of my life, including her first steps, her first, pictures of her in the bathtub when she was a little girl. So from conception till high school, every moment of her life is online. So how do we either educate parents that this is bad, or how do we protect our children from parents who want to post every moment of their child's life online? Thank you.
That is an excellent question.
Leader of the cell phone free movement.
Yeah.
It is education, right? It's understanding they're exposing their child. I personally, when my kids were young, I was posting a few pictures, and as they got older, I started asking them, do you care if I post your first day of school picture on Facebook? And you know what they said? Don't do it. Right. Don't do it. So I haven't posted any pictures of my children in years because it does impact them. It sets the stage and it exposes them, right? It doesn't go away.
Yeah, and I just think it takes leadership upstream heroes. Sometimes we just have to say no. That's why I'm a big fan of bell-to-bell policies. You should say that's the deal, and you may not understand it now, but you will later. It's just leadership. And we only have 4 more minutes, so I want to give each of the panelists an opportunity to give a parting piece of advice. So please.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Tim Bryant. I am a school board member from Okaloosa County, Florida. I'm also the president of the Florida School Boards Association, so it's an honor to be here. Everything I've heard in this particular segment is spot on. Speaker Renner, we're behind you on that. I would just say that the one thing that's been discouraging, what I've heard up here, is nobody wants to be the bad guy. And
I'll be the bad guy.
But
I don't care.
But as parents, I tell this when I get a chance to speak to parents in my school district. Kids do not need you to be their friends. They need you to be their parents.
Right.
Amen.
This is what this representative is talking about.
That's right.
So my question is actually to the parent on the panel is what is the percentage of parents that actually look at their children's cell phone and see what they're actually looking at? What's the data that y'all have gotten from that?
I don't
Thank you.
have any data, but I can give you anecdotal that I think it's very low, right? And there are parental controls and standard common sense rules like no phones in the bedroom, no phones at mealtime. We don't allow phones in the car because when you're in the car, you're having conversation. So again, it comes back to education because I think, like has been said, we can't just do it during the school day. We have to do it at home too. It's a coalition. We all need to work together, collective action.
And I will just say, Governor Youngkin has done a lot of Parents Matter convenings, and in all of those town halls, he emphasizes parent responsibility. This cannot just fall on our educators. And so from the state's perspective, we've absolutely said this is essential, and we're not going to be shy about acknowledging that parents have a part in this as well.
Very important. Our last question.
Hello, my name is Soraya Ulrich. I am a Future Leaders Fellow for the AFC. And listening to this panel kind of made me think about my time in high school and how at times I was basically assigned an assignment where I had to make a social media post or I had to make a short TikTok in uniform, which in a way could be extremely dangerous because the internet is so advanced now. You can simply find a child's location or where they are by just basically looking at a building or like searching up their school from their uniforms. And even now, me studying at Howard University, I'm still being like assigned certain, assignments where I have to make social media posts. And I just wanted to ask, what were y'all's opinions on schools incorporating social media in the curriculum?
Wow. And just real quick, in what context were what's an example of, or the subject that you're trying to learn about that's a logical assignment?
It varies. Most of the time, the assignments didn't even have anything to do with anything that was going on in the class. It was kind of just, I think, teachers trying to be hip and relate to us in a way, so they're incorporating social media. Because most of the time, when I had to do that, it really wasn't.
Wow.
I hear the phrase "meet them where they're at" a lot with kids, right? We want to meet them where they're at, and that's probably where those assignments are coming from. But we don't want to. Where they're at is addicted, right? They're spending more than 5 hours a day on social media. We don't want to meet them there. We want to raise them up, right? And so we don't do assignments about social media posts, right? We don't have our children do that.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to give the panelists each just 1 minute to just any final words of advice. Kim, I'll start with you because I know you have a slide.
I want to say you can do this. If you're a state that hasn't, you're downstream. If you're a state that does have an upstream or a phone-free policy, a bell-to-bell phone-free policy, then you're upstream. And we need to do this. And we can help you do that. The Phone-Free School movement has resources. We have a toolkit for administrators. I have a couple here, but there's a QR code on the screen if you want to download this. This is a roadmap on how to engage stakeholders, minimize pushback, and transition to a phone-free school environment. So we offer that for free. And then we also are in the process of developing legislation, model legislation that's found in social media free. So the other QR code is to sign up to receive that model legislation when it should be complete later this month. I also have a briefing doc on that legislation if you'd like to come up and grab one.
Thank you. Emily, any parting words?
Yeah, we also, in our one-stop hub on the Department of Ed site, you can access every policy that's been adopted by all the school divisions to date. Just see some of the protocols they've implemented. The fireside chat with Jonathan Haidt and our First Lady is posted along with the toolkit of resources if you want to leverage something like that in your own community. And then I guess the biggest thing is, we really took it as we are implementing the minimum. You cannot go below, but you can certainly exceed, and gave enough local control and autonomy for our communities to weigh in on how and the metrics for storing. But we're very relentless on what a cell phone free educational environment looks like. And that kind of autonomy for local communities to raise the bar even further with input from their constituents was really critical. But we cannot underscore the importance of the conversations grounded in this data and research and statistics, as well as guidance like the School Leader Toolkit, supporting our school boards in how and what resources you can look to for policies for implementation at a local level. And so if you need anything, definitely check out our department's website.
Yep. Paul?
I would just say I don't think there's any time where children have had more threats coming at them, not just in this topic. And so you can do everything right, the best teachers, best instructional materials, the best school you can possibly go to. Yep. If you're suffering chronic depression because of digital use, you're never going to get to your full potential. That would be my parting words, is that this is absolutely an existential, right now, whole of government, whole of society priority. It has to be to get our kids out of the digital addiction so that they have the capacity to learn in our schools.
Yeah. And I would just say, as someone who runs schools, all of this exists in the larger context of what is the culture, what are the values that your school really follows. So in our school, it's organized around the 4 cardinal virtues of courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. But when we rolled out our new cell phone policy to say we're going to take cell phones, AirPods, smartwatches in the morning and lock them up, we said this isn't to support you in our focus on temperance. I lead my life with self-discipline because I am responsible for my learning and behavior. So we tied our policy to one of the core values of the school. So the more that I think you can do that, the more that this isn't just some punitive action, but it's aligned with the type of human being that we're trying to create for our schools. So with that, thank you very much for our great conversation, our panelists.